Welcome to our new episode of the Wardley Mapping Spotlight. Today, I have a pleasure to host Steve Purkis, who is one of the persons who worked with Simon when Wardley Mapping was born. Is that right, Steve?
Yeah, that's right. So it's Fatango, and I think he started out with the ideas before but I joined Fatango, but I joined to actually help Zimke, right? So build Zimke. So I was part of that story, and so I saw some of the first Wardley maps before the rest of the world did, I guess.
Have you been working with Wardley Mapping since then?
Yeah, so I've used it at a number of places since then, and yeah, so it's been both useful and sometimes not very well received, let's say. So
That's interesting. Could you tell us, could you describe us a situation in which you use Wardley Mapping to solve a particularly difficult or interesting problem?
sure, yeah. So I can talk actually about one of my current customers at the moment. So I guess for context, so I've founded a company called Complex Adaptive, where I help companies build up their situational awareness and look for better ways of organizing and that sort of stuff. And one of my current customers is Glasswall. So Glasswall Solutions is, well, basically, what do? They are, let me just pull up their site here. Would it help to show? Like if I showed
Yeah, that's okay.
a screen share there for you. So Glasswall's my client. And yeah, probably help to know a little bit about what they do. So they're in the content security space, and their product is it's called Glasswall Rebuild. You can see they've got a bunch of products actually around it. That really, what it does is it turns the typical antivirus model on its head, right? So they have something called a content and disarm and reconstruction platform, and what that does, instead of, if you think of antivirus, right? So it takes in some potentially malicious files and analyzes them, and then flags it whether or not it's malicious or not, and then typically you delete the file, right? So with this content disarm and reconstruction, or CDR, it actually does it the other way around, right? So it rebuilds, say you download a PDF, it rebuilds that PDF from scratch, from known good parts, and it looks exactly like the original. So that's their business idea, their business model in general. And Glasswall, they just landed a new customer, and they were trying to move mountains overnight to deliver a new product. Right? So Dennis, their CTO, was really keen on Wardley maps, and he wanted to introduce them to improve their situational awareness and organize effectively, really. So that's where I came in, right? He brought us in to help. And yeah, so I've mentioned, they've got this idea of like email and API. So the customer had a completely different set of needs around proxy and network traffic, which I can show you a map of in a sec. And they wanted to ramp up quickly, really. So what they did, and their business problem at the time really was bringing in these temporary resources via a platform called Upwork to deliver this project, right? So it was kind of focused on delivery with strategy as a kind of a second part, if you will, to it. So we were brought in to help them organize effectively around these temporary resources, and around this project that they called the Kubernetes proxy, or the K8 proxy. And let's just see. So here's so part of this massive slide deck, which you're welcome to have a look at afterwards. That we've delivered for them, right? So we started in September to deliver on these three goals, really. First was establishing the practice of Wardley mapping and building up their capability. And after that, it was looking at the universal doctrine and recommending changes to their organizational structure. So that was the context, I guess, of where we got brought in. And yeah, in terms of how mapping is helped.
So maybe I will have a little bit, because what got me excited about what you have said is that there was a large number of new people coming from the Upwork into the organization, and they had to be somehow quickly skilled up and verified and trusted, or there was some other sort of mechanism which was probably used to figure out which work are safe to be delegated to that new persons, and which part of the work has to be handled internally by Glasswall itself, doesn't it?
There is, and that decision was actually made before bringing in the temporary people, right? So their core platform, if you will, their core product. So this Glasswall rebuild product is only touched by internal teams, whereas the other bits, right? And we can have a look at some of the value chains and bits that these temporary workers were actually getting their hands on. Yeah, those bits were open source by default. So.
Okay. Could you show us any map?
Yeah, sure. So let me just get into this. Right. So like I say, I've got there's a huge amount of stuff in here that I can show you. The maps, where to start, right? Maybe I'll just jump in here, right? So start with this, and then we can go into some more detail. Maybe I'll put this into present mode as well, so that you can actually see it a little bit better, right? So what have we done so far? So we've delivered a whole bunch of training, and we've helped people build a lot of maps, right? So again, like if you look at the reason why we were brought in, it was to help build that capability. But we've also provided advice as well to the organization. And to do that, actually, we looked at Doctrine, right? So, and this is taking a step back from actually mapping, creating a Wardley map itself and looking into the other elements of Wardley mapping, right? So Doctrine being a key one of those. So if you think about the strategy cycle in that. So yes, we did, and it is still early days, but we did a great Doctrine kind of initial session. And the main thing that Glasswall's got out of Wardley Map so far really is this awareness about the current state of Doctrine at the technical leadership level, right? So for that, I can show you here if I'm just going to take this out and get the presenter deck here so that I can quickly navigate to the other ones. So presenter view, do that, and then I'll do this. It's like so. Right. Okay. So there, the Doctrine that they got at the leadership level. Slide 55. I'll just jump ahead to that. So we did a Doctrine Analysis, and like I say, one of the main things that Glasswall got out of this was this kind of awareness, right? So this was a Doctrine Analysis across the technical leadership team plus a number of other people. And
but before we proceed, I need to interrupt, because when you have created this table with them, what was their reaction or response when they saw how their situation looks like?
It depended, right? So, and that's why I wanted to show you the two different views, right? So,
Okay.
So we've got this view here of like the technical leadership team plus a wider group of people, right? And then we've got one of the technical leadership team itself, right? So, and you can see the difference, right, in terms of what the leadership team thinks it does well versus what the wider group thinks it does well, right? So, in that delta is telling in some ways. But what I also did, right, and if you look at phase one, you can see that there's two key ones that are a bit more red than the others, and highlighted a little bit more around here, right? So this removing bias and duplication, and the systematic mechanism of learning, right? So and these are two things that the leadership team agreed needs to be addressed, right? So we've got a plan to address these key pain points, right? So we're actually looking at reconfiguring the organization into a cell-based structure using Stance's organized services operating model, which I can show you again on that as well, right? So and all of this is based on this doctrine here that you see, but also some of the maps that the teams have done. So there, let me just jump ahead, right? So doctrine, so this is, a quick look at what a cell-based structure would look like, right? So you've got a number of different cells here with a leadership team kind of governing them. And in terms of the slides the teams have done, so this is looking at a map, right? So then I can show you how we got to this point, right? So this is a simplified view of some of the other maps, and we did many maps to actually get to this point. But this is, what the Glasswall organization could look like if we went down, depending on how far down this route we go, right? And which ways we decide to divide up the different services. Mm-hmm. So we actually did some experiments with this as well, right? So yeah, so it's like I say, it's early days, but this is one of the key things that Glasswall has got out of that is this doctrine awareness and this idea of switching to a services model. But there's other things as well, right? So the teams have benefited too with like better awareness of purpose and landscape. So there are lots of aha moments as the teams began to see how their work fit into the bigger picture. And this came out of the mapping, the value change, and in conjunction with the architecture, the technical architecture, and discussions that we had around all this stuff. So it was quite cool. And there were also uncomfortable moments as well, as solutions were challenged. Like, do we really need to build that in-house? And somebody had already started going down that path. And in some case, yes, yeah, we did need to build that in-house. But in others, it was clear that nobody even thought about using off-the-shelf tools, right? So when all you've got a hammer is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. Right?
Definitely. Steve, thank you for this walkthrough. If you were to give one bit of advice to people who are starting their adventure with Wardley Mapping, what would it be?
So one bit of advice. It's going to take time, and yeah, so it can be overwhelming in terms of where to start, and that's where where I've said it's not been all that well received in the past in some cases because it's such a big thing, right? So really, it's start small, start simple, and keep at it. There's a lot of value you can get out of it.
Steve, this is a very nice map, which is probably useful in organizing the company around services. Could you explain or describe the way which led you to this map?
Yeah, sure. Right. So again, what you're seeing here is the first draft of services for Glasswall, and we're looking at how to take this forward from here. Right. So, but in terms of how we got there, if you just zoom out, so this is the Miro board that I've used to really make sense of all the maps that we did, and you can see we did a lot. Right. So overall, we went through this three-step kind of process here, which I can show you in a bit more detail in a second, right? So first of all, we looked at, it's a little bit too small to read. We looked at doing what I call 6 questions. So asking teams who your users are, what are their needs, how you meet those needs, etc. Right? So we did workshops with each of the teams. And then we took the results of those workshops and we did more workshops with them, right? So to produce the first set of value chains. And you see those value chains all across here. Finally, then we took the results of those value chains, and then converted them, or helped the teams to convert them into Wardley maps. And all of these really, these different maps and such, all paths led to Rome, if you will, right? So they all led to this this final view, this simplified view of the services. Obviously, there's within each component, as you know, on a Wardley map, you've got potentially another map, right? So all of this was really useful, but other bits that were really useful as well was that were run alongside this mapping effort was technical architecture. So defining the technical architecture, and there's actually quite a high kind of level of correlation intentionally between the final technical architecture and this map. And finally, you've also seen the doctrine that we did, right? So the doctrine assessment, and that's all fed into to this as well. So it's a number of different different ways that we got there, that we converged on that.
What was the most difficult part of this process?
Well, so here again, we were taking temporary temporary resources, temporary people, and training them on how to map. And then going through this, right? So there's steep learning curves for everybody going up this, while at the same time, and really what took priority was the delivery, right? So I mentioned, again, if you go back to the situation that the Glasswall was in when this started, so they just won a new customer and they needed to deliver. So that delivery pressure, when combined with like trying to go up these learning curves for maps, I think that was the biggest challenge.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to have you here. Thank you again.
Sure.